what you guys are doing and what we can do for the future of this company and our neighborhoods in this whole town. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina, for coming this evening. I know many and numerous people have reached out to me since this was posted on social media. I think for an update, I might actually bring the chief up here in just a second, but as he's coming up here, I do want to also reference, of course, going through some of the different issues that followed 2011 and a lot of the problems that followed that. It does take a little bit of time to clean up these messes. They don't appear overnight, and it does take a little bit of time to, I think, clean up the, I don't want to call it vermin, but essentially there's a lot of problems, and they tend to fester for a little while. But we do have a meeting tomorrow with city staff, department heads, so that we can continue to look at further means. But I'm going to bring the chief up here for just a quick update on this as well, as he's been dealing with this even before it was brought up on social media. So thank you again, Tina, for coming this evening. Chief, if you would, an update on what you can tell us.
I've been a part of a number of meetings with some city staff on the issue of some hotels that are operating as apartments and discussing the issues as they relate to whether they're in proper zoning, what activities exactly are going on at the hotels and how we can address them, or other properties, I should say. Recently, the property that we're talking about right now, we have contacted First District Health Unit. We're in working with them on addressing some of the issues that have come up, and I believe there's a meeting scheduled with you and some staff tomorrow that will also be addressing this. But I think there'll be some progress made in the very near future. But these things don't happen overnight. As far as the police department's response to different calls out there, I mean, we've handled the calls, the situations that we've responded to, we've certainly tried to address on the spot to the extent that we can. Some of the issues are more long-term.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that update, Chief. And after the update tomorrow, we'll try to reach out, I think, on a more public scale, as well as a further update on the plan of agenda out there with the property in question.
Sure.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions while we do have the chief up here? Alderman Potagula.
Yeah, I'm not on social media at all, so I have no clue as to what property you're talking about.
1900 East Burdick.
And that is that the hotel that was, their former hotel was featured in the paper over the weekend?
That's correct.
Okay, good. Okay, yeah, I saw the article, but all of the rest of this is news to me.
Sure.
I guess the comment I would make is that this sounds like a pretty egregious situation. It sounds like, the city's doing what it can, but I think this raises to me the broader issue of we have properties like this, and this kind of thing keeps coming up from time to time. And, when I brought it up personally, in the past, many years ago, the response has been, well, we don't have the money. Then we don't have the authority. Then we have to do this. And I understand. I'm not in any way being critical, but it seems like this is a recurring issue. It comes up intermittently. And, maybe it's a matter of we need to straighten up our ordinances. Maybe we need to have more person power, I don't want to say manpower, in the inspections department. We can't be cruising the streets looking for trouble, and I don't think that's appropriate. I don't think citizens really want that or expect that from us. But when we have complaints like this, my own feeling has been that we haven't been as proactive, and we haven't been as responsive sometimes as I would have liked. And, it's very frustrating to me when I keep hearing, well, there's nothing we can do, or it takes a long time. I know it takes a long time, but, and if the barriers are at the state level in terms of state legislation, I think we need to look at that and bring it to the attention of the League of Cities. If it's in terms of our kinds of constraints, then I think we need to look at that seriously. And again, I'm very concerned about Ms. Alexander here. When she says we're at our wits' end, a group of citizens, a neighborhood, that's troubling to me. So, I'd like us, when we were at the planning meeting, and I'd like, in terms of our priorities as a city, to pay attention to this kind of stuff. I know in a building I used to lease space in downtown about 8 or 9 years ago, there was a squatter in the floor below me. And he filled the building full of smoke. The rental agent, the owner, probably probably wasn't negligent in not keeping the building secured, but they had locked it at times. They were smoking. The place reeked. We finally entered into it, afraid of fire hazards, whiskey bottles all over the place, whatever. It was a commercial property, commercial building. And the police responded very, very nicely. The ambulance people showed up. The person was hauled away. They were passed out drunk. They could have burned the building down. And again, I think the property owner has responsibility. I'm not saying it's all on our shoulders. That's their primary responsibility. It's their property. But I think it was a very scary experience for me. And people were coming and going all hours of the day and night, and they would sneak in before the building got locked and staying overnight. And it just, these things happen. And it bothers me. Anyway, so my sympathies toward the constraints you have, my confidence that, there's goodwill here on our end and we'll do everything we can, but the things keeps coming up and it really does endanger people's lives. My building almost got burnt down. There were ashes all over the place. They're passed out drunk smoking. And here it sounds like an awful situation on Burdick. It keeps happening again and again, and I don't know. I'm just frustrated too with it. So good luck.
I have no doubt we could sit and talk for an extensive period of time on this one. As we're all aware, there's numerous things that we're going to take a look at tomorrow, including some of the ordinances and suggestions along those lines. Not to say that anything definitive will come out of that out to council, but we do want to explore where we do have some options. So Chief, you're aware of it, we are aware of it, we know it's a very visible issue within the community, and we're taking it exceptionally serious. And I have also, as I put out onto social media and a lot of other folks, that we also have the North Dakota State Fair, and with this being so visible within our community, we also don't want this as one of the more visible items within the community when we invite the hundreds of thousands of people into our great city for that big festival. So again, to the neighbors, it's never going to happen quick enough. And thank you, Chief. This is, it's not an excuse, but we also have to have a perception of reality when it comes to dealing with this. As I referenced to the one gentleman who suggested that the city just take the property and run it and find somebody to manage it. Realistic expectations of what can actually follow with this process. But we will follow this up significantly more tomorrow. But again, thank you to the residents for coming forward and to reaching out, and many of you with realistic expectations. Any last call for public appearances? Let's move to number 4, a public hearing.
A public hearing to consider a request by Chad Sickles to relocate a single-family residence from 104 6th Street Northeast to 7520 15th Avenue Southeast, subject to conditions.
This is a public hearing, an opportunity for anyone in favor or opposed to the proposal that is in front of us for the relocation of a single-family residence. Once again, a public hearing for anyone to come forward and speak for or against. Last chance. If not, I would look for a motion. Alderman Janser.
Mr. Mayor, I move we close the public hearing and approve the item.
Second.
Motion to approve, second by Alderman Pittner to close the public hearing and approve. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson. Yes. Pittner,
Yes.
Podrogula.
Yes.
Straight,
Yes.
Wolski,
Yes.
Sitma.
Yes, motion is approved. That takes us to number 5, Mayor's Report. For some of the different meetings and activities, and as we were talking about nuisance issues right here in the Magic City, on June 4th, I actually got to personally revisit some of the bigger nuisance issues that have been down in the valley for a significant amount of time, getting behind the controls of an excavator for a while and helping tear down one of the zombie homes. Very much appreciate the public support, the community support that helped kick off that campaign, as well as the residents that joined me back in 2013 when that began. And to date, we now do have 7 homes this summer. After a meeting this morning, we did add one more to the list of demolition. So thank you, John, for that. We added, is it total of 7 now, or is it 8? It is 8. Okay, so our number keeps climbing. Thank you, John. On June 5th, I did have a meeting with the Downtown Professionals, Business Professional Association, and gave an update on where we were at with some of our NDR projects. The 6th was the Chamber Military Affairs Committee. On June 6th was the Sound of Independence Live Music Fest. I have been all over social media and have been unable to find my rendition of Keith Urban, Somebody Like You, but that is where I helped go out with their festival and support their cause. And that night as well went up to the Dakota Territory Air Museum for their 75th anniversary of the World War II D-Day commemoration of that event. If you did miss it, it was a phenomenal, spectacular event. We're very proud to have the Dakota Territory Air Museum within our community. On the 11th, I did have the opportunity for more than 40 different representatives on a U.S. bilateral U.S. and Japanese presentation of the history of North Dakota and also the history of Minot. Then on June 12th, talked a little bit of recycling with a Boy Scout in town that was working towards a badge. And then on the 13th, met with some folks with JustServe.org that are helping, I think, collectively bring together all of the different nonprofits to one site that is essentially kind of the hub and spoke, where you go to JustServe.org, click on all the different, whichever nonprofit that you see on the site, and it would take you right to their website. On the 13th was also Verendrye Electric's annual meeting, and then the IEDC stakeholder on the 17th. On the 19th, City Manager Barry and I did travel down to Bismarck along with a couple of our Public Works directors, matter of fact, as part of the SRJB to testify in front of the North Dakota State Water Commission. We were down there to support the proposal to change the local cost share that is outside of city limits. Right now, currently, we have the 65-35 with the state of North Dakota, where the state picks up 65 on our construction projects and 35 on our local share. We were hoping to convince the State Water Commission, the areas outside of Minot, to increase those proportions to 75% of the state share, as many different rural projects that have been funded around North Dakota in the past have been at a higher level than what we are currently. One example of that was Valley City. However, the proposal was denied by a unanimous vote, so we will continue to work on finding whatever different funding sources we can through our enhanced flood protection project. On June 20th, we all sat around for the budget workshop, or at least for the most part. On the 26th, I did have the opportunity to go into the Good Talk Minot for an hour-length interview, which is available on their website and also on social media. On the 27th, I had a home closing for the one of the flood homes, and today, I also did have the opportunity to attend a meeting with Senator John Hoeven with Veterans Affairs Committee, and also an update on some of the planning for Stage 5 on flood control. As you can see, I did have numerous other meetings, phone calls, social media engagements, text messages, among many others. So if anyone does have any questions, Alderman Straight.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to commend you for forwarding a letter and thank Alderman Olson and Alderman Janser for participating in the Juneteenth event in front of City Hall. I thought that was well done, and I appreciated them being there to speak on behalf of you, sir.
Yes, absolutely, and thank you to both Alderman Olson and Alderman Janser. Thank you for reminding me that there was many other things going on that day outside of the Capitol. If there are no other questions, I would turn things over to our city manager. Oh, we do have appointments today. I had forgotten that I had a couple of those. We do have one appointment before you for consideration.
Mr. Mayor, I would move your appointment.
Motion by Alderman Olson for approval, second by Alderman Straight. Any discussion on the motion? Call the roll, please.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Straight?
Yes.
Wolski?
Yes.
Fitma?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Motion is approved. That does take us to our city manager report number 6 on our agenda. Good evening, Mr. Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. How are you?
I am well. Yourself. Welcome back.
Thank you. It was a nice week trip to Medora to see the musical and spend time with family out in the wilderness. That was great. So thanks for your patience while I was away. Mayor and council members, I have the July report for your consideration, and we'll just jump right in as we do with important dates. A couple to be aware of. July 4th is a big day, of course, not just because city offices are closed, but we have the Minot Air Show at the Minot International Airport. We'll talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation, and also the fireworks show as well. The North Dakota State, or excuse me, let me go to the Regional Main Street meeting in Minot, which I'll touch on a little bit more later in the presentation. Will be on July 9th. On the 19th, State Fair begins. The 20th is the State Fair Parade, which we're excited about. Planning Commission will be on the 29th, and then the City Council retreat. We are asking you to continue to hold July 31st and August 1st. Those 2 dates we've been communicating about. The mayor and I will be working out more details tomorrow in our meeting in the morning. So hopefully details will be forthcoming here fairly quickly, but if you could continue to hold those dates as we work on the agenda and topics and those sorts of things, that would be great. Next, wanted to, this is mostly for the folks in the audience and those viewing at home or viewing later who didn't get an opportunity to see the budget workshop meeting that we had about 2 weeks or so ago. Just want to give a very high-level overview of the budget. As you all know, we are approaching the budget very differently these last few years, taking a much longer-term view at needs, looking at historical performance, trends, and tracking, incorporating financial modeling and forecasting, both on the revenue and expense side of the operation, looking together with the council and building the budget as early as possible, as opposed to building it separately and then plopping it on your desk in August and giving you 3 weeks to do whatever you felt necessary for. What we're trying to do is, again, be anticipatory and incorporate your concerns and issues and your priorities, and that's why we developed the budget priorities and principles at the onset of the budget process. And of course, the overall outcome, I think you'll agree, is an improved budget process, and the results, you know sooner what's going to happen and why, and we have much more time to address issues and challenges that might be in our future. So with that, a couple highlights from that. The budget schedule, we're on track. This month, we are continuing to work on the budget, and we'll be putting together the budget message and other presentation materials. We'll be copying and binding the budget late this month, and then on August 5th, which is the City Council meeting, I will give you a small presentation, and we'll talk about the budget and kind of what's in and what's not and those sorts of things. August 19th will be a question and answer session, so you'll have between the 5th and the 19th sort of prepare for that. That'll be at 4:15, so it's a special meeting, and it'll be in Auditorium Room 201. Of course, that is open to the public as well. The President's message will be due September 3rd, and then on September 16th will be the public hearing on the budget and the budget ordinance, and as well the first reading of that ordinance. And then on September 23rd, we'll have another special City Council meeting, which will incorporate the adoption of the final budget ordinance. So that's what the budget looks like at this point in time. We are tracking on schedule here. As you know, and you've seen this slide a few times, we have made significant modifications over the last couple of years to straighten out some of the financial trends that we were concerned about going forward. And these are just a summary of some of those adjustments that we've made. And it's your courage and your leadership that's helped us get to the position that we are today. And that is an excellent outlook on the future budget, including this next year's budget. So I wanted to touch on that just a little bit. We did make property tax adjustments over the last 2 years. That was very painful for all of us. That has netted us about $8.2 million on an annual basis over 2017 revenue numbers on property taxes. And here's a big misnomer. A lot of folks think that property taxes are the dominant revenue source for the city, and they are not. In fact, property taxes only net us about $25 to $26 million of our $170 million budget. Hub City funding, we were very successful, as you know, going to the state legislature and getting that formula revised. That will net us an additional 2.7 or so million over 2018's formula numbers. Sales tax revenues, in large part, we think, due to some modest growth, but predominantly sales tax collections from online sales, we estimate to be anywhere from $100,000 to $250,000 more revenue over 2018 numbers. And then the city's gotten a little bit more aggressive about interest income. So we still are being conservative in our investments, but a little more aggressive than we have been in the past. And so that has netted us almost $700,000 annually over 2017 numbers. We anticipate that trend to continue in the future. Along with those additional revenues, which has helped offset what we had anticipated a year or so ago as being potentially another property tax adjustment, which is not going to happen because of these things. We have also curbed expenses, which have considerably assisted us in that outlook. We are still down about 15 positions since 2018. We are saving about $5 million annually on operational cost reductions that were put into place in 2018. The Community Facilities Fund was eliminated, and that saved the city about $5 million annually since 2018. And the grants and donations section of the budget has also been reduced by $600,000 annually since 2018. Now, that's just a few of a number of different things that have gone on in the budget over the last couple of years as we have attempted to align revenues and expenses and also incorporate a more anticipatory approach to the way that we're planning our financial future. So with that being said, we are using reserves for project work. We're not using it as we had in the past for operational coverage, meaning to cover operational expenses, ongoing expenses. Instead, we're using reserves that we saved up for certain projects to use on those projects. We have the majority of the reserves that we plan to use in 2020 have already been set aside and will continue to be set aside and then utilized for the NAS project, Northwest Area Water Supply Project, and also the flood protection project. So of course, as we earn those revenues, we put them into a special fund, and then when we're ready to spend those, we take those reserves and we spend them. So that's how that's working. This is the 4-year model projection, and as you can see in 2020 and also into 2021, we're looking pretty stable. This is exciting news for us. And as you can see going into 2022 and 2023, as the model cumulative, we start getting ourselves a little bit out of alignment that is largely due to the flood control expenses that are coming our way. And that's still something we're working on and modeling closely, and we're working on legislation for the next legislative session, and other sorts of activities are going on behind the scenes too to try to help mitigate or prevent any additional adjustments on the taxing side of things. But 2020 and 2021 look pretty good right now. No property tax increase is being recommended at all for 2020. And of course, you knew that when we talked last week or the week prior, but just wanted the rest of the community to be aware of that. So we'll move next into talking about construction and a little bit more on 3 big projects that are going on in our community right now. Flood control phase 1. Broadway and traffic impacts on Broadway are going to continue just a little bit. We're going to switch to the west side to pour new concrete on Broadway and 4th, and that's expected to finish hopefully by the end of this month, kind of get things back to normal. The flood walls and the pump station are proceeding on pretty nicely. We have vertical placement of the flood wall footings, which is going to be the primary focus of that project in that vicinity for the next 3 to 5 months. And below grade structures are nearly complete on the pump station. So that's pretty exciting. On the 2nd and 3rd phase, the Perkett pump station is scheduled to be started up in August. We have approximately 1,000 linear feet of levee work, which remains along or near 16th Street. Footings for the 16th Street closure are being poured, and this will continue into August. And then finally, the 30-inch NOS line will be relocated through that particular closure, and of course, that's going to impact traffic. But we hope that the traffic will be essentially will return things to normal on or around September, mid-September timeframe. Moving to the water treatment plant expansion, this is an exciting project, something that is also paired with the NOS project as part of our anticipation to accept water through the NOS pipeline from Lake Sakakawea. It's a $26 million expansion, 35% of which is our local share that we've been contributed to, and the state share is 65%. Precast walls are being set, and the expansion is going to more than double the amount of capacity that can be treated through the water treatment facility. Our peak summer water usage tends to be around 10 or 11 million gallons per day. And we're going to take the facility of 13 and we're going to expand it by an additional 18. So that's pretty exciting. We're hopeful that this will be operational by the mid-2020. All right, let's talk a little bit about NDR activities. The Gathering Space project still continues. We continue to work with property owners. We have 3 property owners in particular that we are conversing with now and have been for some time. So not much to report exciting, at least on that point just yet. But we are hopeful over this next several weeks that we can get the project, continuing to gain speed and move this project along. On the Family Homeless Shelter, this is another National Disaster Resiliency project. This has been something that's been, it's very exciting, and it's been in the works for some time. Lutheran Social Services has identified a property on South Broadway that they're intent on, kind of vetting out, making sure that it'll work for their purposes. And if it does, it will be a very exciting addition to our community and very well matches the intent of the NDR application and what we had committed in our community to bring about, which is a family homeless shelter for those in need in our community. Next, I want to talk a little bit about zombie homes. We have an update here. 6 original zombie homes are demolished and 2 more are going to close this year. The current count remains at 19 blighted, and 7 of those are unwilling to sell. 12 are unresponsive. We just haven't been able to really get a response from those folks. 6, however, have pulled permits to repair. So we do continue to see the number of these so-called zombie homes be reduced over time. And the options for these zombie homes, once they're demolished, is you can do the Neighborhood Next Door program, but that program's been moderately successful. Of course, that comes with some caveats, meaning that you, of course, can't build on those lots. There's some other restrictions as well. Or the Low to Moderate Income Initiative, and this is a housing initiative, which in the floodway or flood zone is going to be difficult for a lot of folks to meet because you have to be above the base flood elevation, carry flood insurance and other sorts of things. So that can be somewhat problematic. So depending upon where the lots are, your options may be limited. Up next, I wanted to talk about the fire department staffing. Hopefully, I was not here, and I was saddened by that, but we did have graduation for the next recruits at the fire department. 6 recruits graduated the fire academy. That 7 firefighters also completed their probationary period, and we had 2 additional hires that are being made this month, which will bring the fire department to fully staffed, something we haven't seen for quite some time. So we're pretty excited about that. I want to thank Fire Chief Kelly for a great, as I'm told, because I've been to 2 others, and I know she does a great job, and her staff do a great job bringing on these new recruits and taking those others out of probationary status and making them feel welcome in our community, and certainly in the fire community as well. Next, I want to talk a little bit about communication for the city. It's been a focus of mine since I've started with the city. We continue to extend our outreach. You know that one of my initiatives was to start a city newsletter. We've done that. I'll share some numbers with you about how that newsletter is doing. We have so many stories now that essentially the newsletter is getting bogged down with so much content that we notice fewer and fewer people kind of opening it up. It's a little bit overwhelming. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to an every 2-week newsletter. And that's going to allow us to communicate more frequently and to keep the content manageable for those who are reading it. So current subscribers, we have about 2,000 now, but we'll be doubling the circulation, as I mentioned, so 24 editions instead of 12 per year. We are continuing to develop a community engagement strategy. We've met a few times with the community focus group that I developed to talk about various ideas, trends, and opportunities for the city to find better ways to more consistently communicate with our citizenry, business owners, and the like. And we're drafting that strategy now, and we'll be delivering that to the focus group for review, and then we'll be meeting with that focus group and getting their comments, and then I'll take that and revise it. We'll send it through the department director review, and then I'll send it eventually to you, and you'll get it, and hopefully it'll be something we can adopt here in a not too distant future. Also on communication, I want to just give you a couple more metrics. A little bit over, or a little more than 2,000 subscribers are subscribing to the newsletter, and we have an open rate of about 34%, which is 10% above industry average. It's not great, but it's better than industry average. On social media, we're doing quite well. We have about almost 10,000 Facebook fans, if you want to call them that. Instagram followers are pushing close to 1,500, Twitter followers around 624, but we have the largest Facebook audience of any North Dakota city, and that's pretty great. So we have a lot of people that are watching and a lot of people that are learning from what's going on inside the city through social media. So it's an important presence. This just talks about 1 year of followership, essentially, through social media. Just 1 year ago, we only had about 8,600 or so followers, and now we're approaching almost 10,000. And that's just 1 year's time. So this continues to grow as we made the improvements to this facility and to other broadcast components of our operation. We've seen people get engaged, at least through the social media front, and we're appreciative of that. Of course, social media has its pros and its cons, and so, some people are positive, some people are negative, and some people are sort of neutral. This is what it looks like, essentially, what we call social media sentiment just over the last 30 days. Of course, this ebbs and flows. Sometimes it gets better, sometimes it gets worse, but just in the last 30 days, we have about 51% that are neutral on social media with the city, about 28% that are positive, and about 21% that are negative. So not necessarily spectacular numbers, but not out of alignment either. So something we like to keep an eye on and make sure, that we aren't trending too negative too long. And if there's something that needs to be done about that, maybe improved education or inside or other sorts of things. As you know, we also started the mayor's column. The mayor now puts a column out. We've done other things like go down to the newspaper and do editorials or meet with the editorial board and give them access to, say, for example, budget information or other sorts of things. So we really are trying to improve the way we communicate and how often and consistently we communicate in our town. Okay, that being said, we'll move on to the regional Main Street convening. The governor has the Main Street Initiative, as you might know, and we've been working with the governor's team to host a Main Street convening meeting. So Planning Regions 1 and 2 are going to come together at the Brady Martz and Associates facility 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. To talk about the community engagement, workforce attraction, housing, and next steps. And this is going to be kind of an interesting meeting. It's something that's intended to be interactive, so we hope that folks come out and get engaged. And something that we're excited about and we're grateful to be able to host. So you want to make sure to get that on your calendar as well. Also, July is kind of a fun month for us in Minot. We have a lot of great activities. This year we're doing the Spirit of the Plains Air Show. It's on July 4th, Independence Day at 4 p.m. It'll run until 7 o'clock at the Minot International Airport. And the Dakota Territory Air Museum has been a huge collaborator in all of this. It's a free event, so it's going to be exciting. We'll have the snowbirds actually there and a number of other stunt planes and those sorts of things that are going to be doing all sorts of acrobatic and aerial maneuvers and those sorts of things. So it's going to be really fun, I think, for the community. And hope you guys out. Next, the Fireworks Association, the Minot Fireworks Association, which is a new association, kind of began last year, is going to be sponsoring the 4th of July fireworks display. It'll be at the State Fairgrounds starting at 10:45 on Independence Day, July 4th. And I just definitely wanted to give a shout out to Adam and the folks in the Minot Fireworks Association for keeping this important tradition alive in Minot. They've done a fantastic job and deserve a lot of credit in organizing and in finding sponsors and those sorts of things. So good work for those folks. And then, of course, we are the proud host of the North Dakota State Fair, and it's 17 days, 6 hours, and about 15 minutes or so away. We're excited. The State Fair is one of my favorites. It's a pleasant surprise to move to a town, be the city manager, and have the State Fair located in that town. It is just absolutely awesome. So don't forget, it's July 19th to 27th. Get your tickets. It's going to be an exciting time. You'll see me there just about every single day. Usually after work. I do take 1 or 2 days off maybe to enjoy the carnival with the kids and that kind of stuff, so you might see me then too. Also, the parade, you don't want to miss that. It is the longest parade I've ever been to. I will tell you. It is.
More
And
ways
I
than
sat
one.
through the whole thing, yes. And the mayor is going to be featured in the parade. We got him moved up in the lineup, and we're going to set him on a fire truck, and we got some big signs that we'll put on the fire truck, so I'll thank the fire department for that. And bring a sun hat or something. It's a great parade. But that will be about 9:15 on the 20th. And of course, it ends up at the State Fairgrounds, but it starts at Burdick and Broadway. So we're excited. We're excited to have that fair, or the parade to the State Fair that day as well. All right, that's all I have. I know it's kind of a bit, but I'll take questions if you have them, or any suggestions or other things.
Alderman Straight.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tom, I just wanted to kind of commend city staff. Mr. Billingsley gave me an update for Mrs. Alexander in particular. We had residents come last month that had nuisance issues, and I wanted to commend Mr. Billingsley for giving us a little bit of an update prior to tonight's meeting.
Right.
And I really encourage staff tomorrow in your meeting to be creative, bring some ideas of how we can tighten up nuisance ordinances. Ms. Alexander, if you're not aware that we have one code enforcement officer who has conveyed to us through emails recently that there's probably 50 open cases. So there's a lot of headache around the community, and I think staff are doing their best. So I commend you, Tom, and I look forward to those comments. And I guess I just also wanted to touch on the fireworks. 3 years ago, I think when I first got on council, we had a veteran come before us who said, if there's any way to just get out the message in advance that many of us have PTSD, and fireworks, as fun as it is in the neighborhood, can be really disturbing for many of us. So if folks can go out to the fairgrounds, I think that would be great. And if folks can just be mindful of their neighbors, folks have issues, and our service members need to be respected a little bit on that front. So I just wanted to mention that. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Any questions for our city manager?
Mr. Mayor, if I might just respond to
Yes.
Alderman Straight, your first point. I appreciate what you said. I just want to let you know that the city staff have already been working on improvements to the nuisance ordinance. Matter of fact, Brian Billingsley, our new community development director, has been working with our code enforcement officer and principal planner and others, and we have about 6 or 7 different improvements already identified. We'll be going through those tomorrow in a meeting I have with Mr. Billingsley. And then we'll be seeing if we can take any of that, and if it requires any council action or direction, we'll bring that back to you at another time. But that is something that's on the forefront. We've heard the city council loud and clear on. Keep in mind, however, due process is sometimes very frustrating because we can't always work as fast as we'd like because there's certain notifications, there's certain sorts of other processes that have to, by law, take place and occur before any action can be taken place. But I did want you to know it's a priority for us and we're working on it.
That's good. Straight, you had a follow-up?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Tom, can you give us maybe an update, even if at the retreat, regarding the budget and our city website? It's kind of a little cumbersome. We've had comments. I don't know what type of licensing agreements we're locked into. I know I appreciate Mr. Hackett's work, and people want to reach out to us, but I think ultimately they want to talk to staff because they want their problems resolved. Can we have a little update on that and how we can incorporate those changes into your communication plan so folks like Ms. Alexander can get city staff who's going to address their problem and a timeline of communication?
Mr. Mayor and Alderman Straight, we're already working that one as well. We are due for an update our website update this year. I've asked Mr. Hackett to push that off to October as we focus on the budget and we focus on the town hall and the council retreat and get through some of these other things. So we are looking for October. We have some content that's being reviewed by certain departments. For example, the new community development department is going through their content, and of course that's where the zoning and the code compliance and other portions of our operation are housed. So they're going to get a head start on that updating that information. But the whole website update will happen a little bit later this year, and it is a free update for us with the provider that we have. We get every certain period of time a free update. We just have to kind of direct what we want in the way of content and those sorts of things. So that is a project that's on the horizon.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Alderman Patagula.
Just following up on that and to clarify what I said earlier, part of my frustration with these nuisances is that there have been so many other things that have been going so much better in the city. And I certainly in any way don't want to be critical of city staff. I've seen them, and I've said publicly and privately how hardworking, without exception, they are. It's just that, from my perspective, having first started on the council in 1998, I think we've had in the past some, I think, cynicism on the part of the public and sometimes apparently an indifferent attitude on the part of city staff and council. I think it starts at the council and the mayor level. And then it's changed dramatically since your election, since the new council, since the new system of government. And you're right. I'm a forensic psychologist, I know a little bit about due process. But, it's been 8 years since the flood. And sometimes when these things come up, it's just, it is frustrating. And again, part of my comments earlier, again, aren't in any way meant to be critical of city staff or the direction that we've set and you've implemented. But you feel for people. You feel when their neighborhoods or their houses are, are overgrown with weeds and their value is impacted and they have to deal with this kind of stuff. And I think it's easy for a government at any level to just kind of throw up its hands and say, well, it's the way it is. And I don't see that anymore here. But I think that's a risk. We're a small community, our funding's limited. So, that's part of where I'm coming from is the history of it in the past sometimes has not been the best, to say the least. And now, when we are energetic, when we are more vibrant, it's kind of sticks in your throat, if you will, because so many other things are going so well. And, while I'm certainly, and our attorney is certainly mindful, most of us, I think, are mindful of the legalities, and they can be cumbersome, the average citizen probably isn't. And at some point, we take responsibility for the legalities, at least locally. So again, I wanted to kind of echo what Shannon was saying. I appreciate the hard effort. It seems like we give you so many things to do, and just a note of support and encouragement on that, in recognition of all the positive changes that have been made.
Thank you, Alderman Padrigola. And I think one of the things we can do in the process is describe the process to the public.
Right.
It's not been done. So people don't know what the process is and how much time it takes to do things and to do the research and do the due process, send the letters out, get the enforcement action, find the abater, the abatement company, do all those. People don't understand that. So we leave them to assume, or we leave them to be frustrated and share those frustrations with you. And what I think we need to do is make sure that process is identified. And of course, the process is different for different kinds of nuisances, so we won't have one for every single, but just a general process. But I think that will help considerably. And also, we want to drive folks not to provide comment or criticism or complaints on the social media site. That's not where you do it. You do it with the staff member. You call the code enforcement officer and you say, I have a code enforcement issue or a nuisance problem. And that's who you call. I mean, if you want something done, you got to make sure that we follow and contact the right people. You can't just put a social media comment out there and expect, magically it's going to get resolved. And we don't necessarily track the social media for complaints that way. We don't have the staff to do that either. We have a process, and that is contact the code enforcement officer, and that helps get it to the right person, get it researched more quickly, and get the process going more quickly as well. So those are things that we'll be also moving to improve in website updates and other communications as well. But thank you for your comments.
Any final questions for our city manager this evening? Thank you, Tom.
Great, thank you.
I would just follow up as I look to our city attorney. Also, just one other quick reminder, as I heard Officer Aaron Moss on the radio today talking about the fireworks, $150 fine if you are caught lighting fireworks off within city limits. And as I understand, it is a busy night for law enforcement. You are encouraged to dial 852-0111. I do listen and talk to the officials there unless it is an emergency. But as Alderman Straighten and the other folks pointed out, it is an issue for folks that do have an issue with PTSD and also for a lot of the animals and pets within town. So please be mindful of that. And if you do go out into the country, remember that is somebody's land as well. And if you do shoot off those fireworks, pick up your garbage that you leave behind. Our city attorney, report this evening.
Mr. Mayor and members of council, I submitted a written report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for our city attorney on her report that has been submitted and attached? Thank you, Kelly. Let's move on to number 8, consider the report of the Planning Commission. We did have 3 items on the agenda that was forwarded to us from the Planning Commission. We have a motion by Alderman Janser to approve, second by Alderman Pittner. Any discussion on any of the, on the motion? Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula.
Yes.
Straight,
Yes.
Wolski,
Yes.
Sitma.
Yes. Motion is approved. Number 9 is our consent agenda items. I have been asked to pull 9.9 out of our consent. We do have a total of 14 other items that includes number 9.8. I've only been asked that if we do have a consent on the remaining items, to acknowledge that 9.8 is also acknowledging that the motion includes the approval of the budget amendment included in that. I would be looking for a motion.
Move the remaining items.
Alderman Janser, including with the language of 9.8? Motion to approve. Do we have a second? Second by Alderman Olson. Again, for anyone in the audience, this is the approval of all items on the consent that you see on your screen, with the exception of 9.9. It will be passed in accordance with what was recommended by staff. Any discussion from the council? Please call the roll.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula.
Yes.
Straight,
Yes.
Wolski,
Yes.
Sitma.
Yes, motion is approved. 9.9 is the lease for the 6 motor graders, the award of bid, and I believe the low bid was RDO equipment. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Alderman Olson,
Second.
second by Alderman Straight. Discussion. Alderman Wolski.
Mayor Sima, I pulled this one just to kind of call attention to it. Snow removal's been a big topic in the city for the last couple of years. This is I would say, a slight operational change to how we've been doing things. Gives us a newer fleet to work with, a little higher quality equipment on the streets, and hopefully some savings. There's a little bit of risk that depends on Mother Nature. This might go in our favor, it might go against us, but we're not immune from risk with the way we're operating currently. So I support the agenda and just wanted to call out the fact that though it's summertime, we're still thinking about things like snow removal.
I appreciate that. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula.
Yes.
Straight,
Yes.
Wolski,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Janser.
Yes.
Motion does approve. That takes us to the action items. 10.1 is the ordinance amendment, the 2019 legislative updates. It's recommended the City Council approve on first reading the attached ordinance relating to the sections 1.8, 23-1, 23-34, 23-34.1, and 23-34.3. All of those are attached or available online. Alderman Wolski.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to take these separately, so I would move approval of section 1-8, the general penalty ordinance.
Okay, we are going to be taking these individually. 1.8, that is a motion to approve.
Second.
Second by Alderman Olson. Discussion on the motion. Alderman Wolski.
I had a kind of a brief wordsmith question maybe for our city attorney here, but section 1-8, general penalty, if we go to section B, and the underlined portion says shall be set forth in section 39-06.1-06. Is that North Dakota Century Code, or is that?
Mr. Mayor and Alderman Wolski, yes, that's the reference to the Century Code section that lays out the fines for traffic offenses.
Okay. Maybe just a comment for future formatting of all of our ordinances. Whenever we mention Century Code, maybe we want that preamble there, NDCC, just so people understand that we're not referring to our own code, but the state code. That being the case, actually, Mr. Mayor, I would offer an amendment that we update this ordinance to reflect changes whenever we reference ordinance or Century Code to give our NDCC little preamble.
We have a motion on that, but before I look for a second, I might need a little bit of direction maybe from our city attorney or city manager on this. Is this something that we need to put into an ordinance for the NDCC portion on that?
Mr. Mayor, we can add it for clarification
Okay,
purposes. That would be fine.
okay. We have a motion
Second.
and a second discussion. And now this is the, I'm sorry, motion to amend, correct?
And just to clarify the amendment, it's to clarify sections where we reference Century Code with the NDCC preamble.
Kelly.
Mr. Mayor and Alderman Wolski, just 1-8 though, because that's the only ordinance being amended at this time.
Absolutely. I'm not encouraging you to go through the entire book of ordinances and do this, but maybe a policy just to adopt going forward anytime these come forward.
That was my.
Had you worried, didn't we, Tom? We have a motion to amend. Any discussion on the amendment? Any discussion? Please call the roll on the amendment.
Wolski,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Straight.
Yes.
Motion to amend is approved. We are back to the original motion for the approval of 1-8. Any discussion on the amended motion? Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Wolski,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Straight.
Yes.
Motion is approved. That takes us to 23-1 of 10.1.
Mr. Mayor, all of the marijuana offenses are in one ordinance. So all the 23 sections.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, 23-1, 23-34. So all of the remaining, I'd be looking for a motion on section 23 with all of the remaining items on there.
Move approval.
Motion to approve by Alderman Olson, second by Alderman Pittner. Discussion on the motion for the approval. Alderman Wolski.
Mayor Sitma, thanks. North Dakota Legislature gave us this draft for lots of reasons. It makes sense to keep the city in general alignment with North Dakota Century Code. But on the whole, what I see here is language that to me is a little bit conflicted or confused in some respects. And so I'm not going to be supporting this particular motion tonight. I realize I'm probably going to be a little bit alone in that particular position. But I think there's a general trend culturally on where we as a society are going with marijuana. I think there's an opportunity here at the local level to do a little bit of policy making that emphasizes why it's important to maintain local control. Because I think if we were to take a little time on this, we might be able to improve on what the legislature has delivered to us and draft an ordinance that I think is a little more in alignment with the public perspective. I'm going to just point out a couple things that I are a little troubled by in this ordinance. One, the paraphernalia, there's no exception for medical uses. I think that's a little out of alignment with the will of the voters over the last few years. There's also what I would describe as some confusing language related to whether ingestion is legal or not. There's a clause in Century Code that prohibits all types of ingestion but makes an exception for marijuana. And then there's another clause that adds a specific nobody under 21 is able to ingest. Like I say, on the whole, I find a little bit of this just confusing. So I don't think this is an ordinance I'm able to support.
Any further discussion on the motion? Alderman Padragula.
Yes, I'm just a little curious as to the trends Alderman Wolski is suggesting we be more responsive to. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. I'm intrigued. I want to trust our city attorney and, for drafting things, but if there are some broader issues, I'd like to have them brought up. Maybe we're not dealing with them, maybe they're not germane here, but I'm just curious what's being alluded to here.
Alderman Wolski.
Mayor Sitma, Alderman Padragula, what's being alluded to here is, I think, as much as I can, is what I said, which is I think there's some conflicting positions in the ordinance. And again, our city attorney is simply forwarding us a copy of what the legislature gave us, right? So this is a pass-through ordinance in essence. And if we do not adopt this, we create some weird process conflicts between the state's attorney and our attorney and municipal court and district court, things like this. So ultimately, for practice and purpose, it makes sense to have these laws in alignment. But part of this job I see is somewhat symbolic too, and I think there is I don't want to support this particular policy because I think the cultural trends that are taking place are towards more relaxed attitudes towards marijuana, to be very direct. I think people are tired of seeing people turned into criminals for using this particular substance or product. And I think we're seeing that trend across the country. And so as is the legislature has wrestled with how to deal with a citizen initiative and try and honor the spirit of that, but also implement the medical program. We're seeing continued efforts on the recreational side. I think there will be, the news I have is there'll be another attempt in 2020. I think this is policy worth taking up and trying to capture the spirit of what the public wants to see. And when we do that at the local level, I think we can be kind of a template for things that work better at the state level.
Any further discussion? Alderman Potter.
I wanted to thank Alderman Walski for his candor and courage, and I'm intrigued by that. And I agree, this is not the time and the place, because Kelly has done a good job trying to make our ordinance consistent with the state one, and that's the way it should be. But I think those are very provocative remarks, and I appreciate you making them.
Further discussion. Alderman Pittner.
Just a question maybe for City Attorney, Mayor. Attorney Kelly, what are the possibilities of taking ordinance, maybe not this one, but other ordinances that we might see in the future, taking a more relaxed standpoint on it versus the state?
Attorney Hendershot.
Mr. Mayor and Alderman Pittner, I guess it depends exactly what type of ordinance that you would want to be doing that to and how you would make it more relaxed.
Okay.
We have certain authorities in our home rule charter to implement ordinances for violations of our code and to set the penalty for those violations. The highest criminal offense that can be charged out in municipal court, so our highest violation of our city ordinance is a Class B misdemeanor. The only thing lower than that for a criminal violation is an infraction, and that's what some of these charges are being amended to. So we don't have a lot of those high charges. So a more relaxed criminal violation
Okay.
going to be hard to find.
Okay. Thank you.
Further discussion. Alderman Straight.
Mr. Mayor, forgive my ignorance, but may I ask the city attorney, does this affect, I believe, any businesses within our community that sell any of these materials?
Mr. Mayor and Alderman Straight sell
Paraphernalia, for example?
The charge is marijuana paraphernalia, so you have to possess it with the intent to use it for marijuana. So
I just wanted to be clear, because I was just curious how it would possibly affect businesses.
Okay.
So,
Yep, there have to be both elements of the offense.
thank you. Just to reiterate for the public.
Further discussion. Motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Straight?
No.
Wolski?
No.
Sitma?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Motion is approved. That takes us to 10.2, the ordinance amendment, City Council meeting order of business. It is recommended the City Council approve on first reading the attached ordinance relating to the order of business for meetings of the City Council.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Alderman Janser, second by Alderman Olson. Discussion on this, as you can see that I had recommended that this be brought forward before the City Council for discussion on the order of change, and this is specific to personal appearances. As we have seen, they do take, or have in some cases taken, an ample amount of time right at the front end of business. What I would encourage folks to do that do want to bring issues before the council is to meet with the elected officials so that we do have the opportunity to get this onto an agenda, to be able to then research and provide those answers that people are oftentimes looking for. And for those last minutes, that absolutely can be brought forward before the City Council for open discussion if it doesn't have time to be on the agenda. But this is really, I believe, a better mechanism to bring those issues forward so that we also have the opportunity to look into some of these issues before they're brought forward and looking for direct answers immediately. Further discussion. Alderman Walski.
Mr. Mayor, I appreciate the sentiment and the thought behind this. So this will be one of those points where I simply disagree. I'm a little bit troubled by an open government that requires personal appearances to wait till the end of the meeting. I fully support the effort to contact an alderman or a city staff member and work with an agenda, and I think we should be very vocal about that's a much better way to bring a process forward. But I just simply, I disagree with the notion that the best way to get that is by putting personal appearances at the end. I know a number of people who have come forward for very simple, light, sort of just simply FYI type of personal appearance in terms of using this podium. And for those circumstances, to ask somebody to sit through what might be a 1 or a 2 or a 3-hour meeting in order to share that message, I think will have a very chilling effect on this particular mechanism in our agenda, and I like the way it operates, so I'll be opposing this motion.
Alderman Patrugula.
I also have mixed feelings. On the one hand, I want to defer to you. You run the meeting, and I want to give your thoughts significant weight. And I really appreciate, and I've said this privately and I'll say it publicly again, I really appreciate the way you run our meetings, sometimes in very conflictual times. I do have 2 concerns. My first concern is, as Alderman Walski says, I think we need to enhance people's communication ability to interact with us. I very much agree with you, Mayor, that if they have a concern, they should bring it to one of us or the city manager, and that gives us more time. But I think people also should have the opportunity to alert the populace at large to a concern. The media usually, for example, the television media are here often toward the end of a meeting. That robs people of an opportunity to be heard. I'm not comfortable with the idea of people having to wait till the very end to speak their thoughts, and I very much agree with your urging them to bring it up earlier and oftener and with us individually. The other concern I have, and this is more of a technical concern as a clinician and a forensic psychologist, is occasionally people who come before us are pretty upset and perhaps sometimes agitated. And I guess I'm not sure for their well-being and our well-being, it's a good idea to put them on hold for an hour or 2 or 3. A lot of times people will vent their spleen. And again, this is a very small number of people, but they're also citizens and they deserve being heard, even if they maybe aren't polite sometimes toward us. I think asking them to wait a long time and having their frustration build is probably not the best idea. Oftentimes when they speak, they vent their spleen, they leave, and they're done. They've said their piece. And I think that's easier for everyone to process. If we wait till the very end for an irate citizen to come up, I'm not terribly comfortable with that. So I'm curious to hear what the other aldermen will say. I have some real mixed feelings on this one. And again, no disrespect meant to you. I think you've done an outstanding job running the meetings, and I want to defer to your preference to a reasonable extent, but this one troubles me a little bit.
Mr. Mayor?
Alderman Olson.
I will support this motion because, for a few different reasons. One, I feel that we will be better prepared if we know ahead of time what is coming before us. More prepared to give an answer instead of saying, we'll look into it, come back in 2 weeks. I also think it gives citizens an opportunity to get here at a little bit more leisurely time. When we started our meetings at 5:30, when we moved that starting time, it kind of cuts into those that are working till 5 or 5:30. It's tough to get here. This is going to give them a little bit more time to now be at the end of the meeting and have an opportunity to get here and sit down and relax for a little bit, kind of get an idea of what our meetings are like, and then be able to speak to us.
Further discussion? Alderman Straight.
Mr. Mayor, if you'd indulge me one question of Miss Alexander in the back of the room, and ma'am, maybe you would just stand up, Mr. Mayor, if it's okay. I'd be curious to hear her thought process on she came before us tonight, had an issue. Obviously, you were aware of the issue. I wasn't as aware, but I'd be curious, ma'am, if you, as a public citizen, would you rather just show up at the beginning of a meeting and present your issue, or would you, as much as I want to have the public participate in more of these meetings, I know that people won't sit through 3 hours of it sometimes. I'd be curious to hear your opinion, ma'am.
I agree with both sides of it, actually. There is the nice factor we can come in and express ourselves. I've never had the privilege of meeting any of you, and I've lived here my whole life. So there is that nice factor of getting to get it in here, get it off your chest, be able to go back to what we're doing at our home base. But I do agree that sometimes there's research that needs to be done and things that need to look up and things that need to come to light first that you guys have to work on before it can be addressed. And it is frustrating when we have to be told to come back and wait. And so there is both sides of it. I don't see why there can't be the opportunity for both of those options in the near future at maybe one at one meeting and you do the other at the other meeting if it needs to be looked into. And let your public know what you're going to do at that meeting before it's even brought up, so that way they know how to prepare themselves too.
Thank you, ma'am, and you can run for office in 2020. Thanks.
I would love to. Thank you.
Good answer.
I would just follow up on a little bit of what Alderman Potagula had asked. And the biggest piece of this is preparation coming into these meetings. Many times we've had a few different gentlemen say, hey, I'm going to come up during public appearances and I'm going to talk about this to a number of us prior to meetings. And to me, it's almost a little bit a disservice to the process in that fact, if it was, and many times it is that important, to reach out, to get it onto our agenda. So it's not only that we as the elected sit up here, but also for city staff, if we do need some of the information leading into finding a resolution or being able to direct it to the appropriate place. And sometimes I do realize it is a point of just getting it out to the media. And that is a case, but as I sit here with my phone open, watching ourselves tonight, just to see what is on the screen, we do have a broad-based media that doesn't necessarily rely on television cameras and newspaper anymore. It is available, and I'm not taking a shot at you, Alderman Potagula, for the social media aspect of it by any means, but there's definitely two sides to this, and I can appreciate both what Alderman Walski had pointed out, is that people do want to come and just get something off their chest, but there is also a substantial amount of value to see the process in place so that it doesn't become just a point for some as a yelling component and to storm out. There's valid arguments on both sides of this, but I feel strongly that we spend a lot of time making preparations for these meetings, talking with staff and doing research, and for those very important issues, I can see that it would be pertinent to reach out to any number of us to ensure that we get those on the meetings. And if there is still a point that needs to be brought up, watching the feed on social media or on the community access channel and be able to gauge, and for many still have time to drive here and make that personal appearance towards the end of the meeting would be a viable option. Alderman Pittner.
Thank you, Mayor. I too am kind of torn on this. I think of it from the perspective of a citizen. I would rather be away from my family at 5:30 than 8:30 when I'm going to put my kids to bed and help my wife feed our children and do those sorts of things. I do see the value in having a citizen come and making them sit through a meeting and seeing the process unfold. But I also see there being value with those public appearances at the front end of a meeting, because then we can digest that as we sit here and deal with issues that may sometimes coincide with what those public appearances are about, whether they be nuisance abatements or property taxes or any array of issues that we see. So I'm not sure how I'll vote on this, but I kind of like the way it's at, just to have people come in here, get it off their chest. Anybody who's spoken at had to kind of have any kind of public appearance and speak in front of a crowd unprepared or prepared. But I do fully support the idea of having these individuals, rather than come to this meeting and be their first encounter with us, to reach out before the meetings. Reach out. I mean, I have no issue with that. But again, having it at the front of the meeting, if I were a citizen, I think I would much prefer that.
Further discussion. Alderman Janser.
Since I chaired the Change of Government Committee, and we, looked at kind of how the council does its business, and the meetings are one of the aspects. And I think, we have evolved our way of operating since then. At first, the committee of the whole process, and then onto a 2 council meetings a month system that we adopted fairly recently. I don't think there's any perfect answer to this, and I think the people who say they could kind of go either way are being honest. I guess what I think is that if we make this change, we should be open to consideration of looking at how it works going forward. And if we find, citizens telling us that, well, I would have appeared, but I'm not going to sit there for 2 hours, or, I think if the citizens find that it's not workable for them, we'll hear about it. And so I guess in that light, I'm willing to support this, but to kind of leave the door open to looking back at it as we go forward and figuring out whether we think it's working or not, because we could always go back.
Alderman Pittner.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I have a follow-up with maybe some of Alderman Janser's comments. If we're open to the idea of it moving, if it doesn't work, have we been hearing from citizens that it isn't working the way that it is? Are we hearing from citizens that, hey, I would have been there, but I couldn't get off work at 5:30? I mean, I'm just looking to see if we've had any of that discussion, or that's been a talking point.
Alderman Pittner, I can attest to at least 3 instances that I do know of in that circumstance. I can't vouch on whether or not in some of the meetings, if they're not appearing till 7 o'clock or 8:30 or whatever that case might be, but that has actually been a case a time or two. The main point on this more so is for the outreach and preparation, but I very much strongly agree with Alderman Janser as well, as this is something that can be revisited if it ends up being on the other side of the equation. Alderman Straight.
Mr. Mayor, this might surprise you, but I came ready to oppose this tonight, and I, as someone who always wants to be flexible and a little more spontaneous, I'm going to support you. And I have to admit, from a couple standpoints, that first, I guess maybe I'll speak to the negative aspect of it, that I like maybe some of the previous comments, I think citizens want to come get it off their chest. I think maybe this system has been to the detriment at the tail end of important agenda items when we lose interest. And I guess that's what I would ask my colleagues to be very mindful of, how these meetings can be very taxing, I think, on us as we stew and think about it and debate. The public might not find it as engaging, but we, for whatever reason, wanted to sit up here. And I think you have to put yourself in the shoes at 3 hours later. You're going to wait and you're going to hear from a resident who's been sitting out there, and you might want to go home. So you have to be very mindful of that change. And so, Mr. Mayor, I think if this is something you want to promote and try, good for you, sir. Let's try it. I'm up for. I was part of Mr. Janser's government change committee. I think that we have to try different aspects every now and then. I am concerned. Just one thought, sir, that it's our constant desire for the perfect government system that I think constantly runs awry. And it stems from our discussions about if we attend planning commission meetings and how the public will reach out to us. And if we talk to residents about their concerns, and we have to remain open-minded. There's this constant desire that we kind of wall ourselves out and hope for the perfect process where we're going to be able to be well prepared. And it's just not, in my mind, this is dirty business. It's certainly for neighborhood residents that are frustrated. I think we've all been there. I just as soon get it out at the beginning, but I'm gonna roll with you tonight, sir. So thanks for trying something new.
Alderman Pittner.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one last comment to maybe piggyback off of Alderman Straight's comments. If we're going to try to put less interesting stuff at the beginning, or maybe when we're trying to be taxed and whatnot, maybe we should move the asphalt presentations to the front of the meeting as well. That's my only comment.
That was no offense to Lance or any other department head.
I'm glad he laughed.
Any further discussion? Further discussion. Motion before us is to approve on first reading. Please call the roll.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
No.
Straight,
Yes.
Wolski?
Nope.
Sitma?
Yes. Motion does pass. 10.3 is the right-of-way encroachment application for the artificial turf 2124 Elk Drive. The recommendation approval of the right-of-way encroachment agreement application submitted by Valley Properties LLC for the installation of the artificial turf in the right-of-way at the 2124 Elk Drive, and authorize the mayor to sign it and sign the revocable encroachment permit.
Move approval.
Motion by Alderman Olson to approve, second by Alderman Pittner. Discussion. Alderman Patagula.
Wanted to ask Mr. Billingsley or maybe Alderman Walski, I haven't been attending the zoning commission revision 10-year project to revise it. Where are we at right now with that? Because that was on the agenda when I stopped going about a month ago because of vacations and things like that. And I guess I'm wondering if this in any way interferes, or if we did adopt, that committee did adopt the more liberal artificial turf policy. I want to make sure there are no inconsistencies.
Perhaps Mr. Billingsley, if you would approach here and we can get an update.
Mayor Sitma, Alderman Padragula, the ordinance amendment was adopted in the month of May, so it is on the books now.
Following up on that, do you have any problems with this in terms of kind of pushing the envelope, or is this well within the spirit and letter of the law?
It is.
Thank you. Thank you for the reassurance.
Further discussion? Further discussion? Alderman Straight.
Mr. Mayor, I also came ready to oppose this tonight, but I'm going to support it now. If the business wants to roll with it, it seems to be a slippery slope. I know we have a resident that's put it on their front berm after the flood. I don't think it's necessarily something you want in the residential neighborhoods, but I want to be supportive of the business owner.
Further discussion? Please call the roll.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Straight?
Yes.
Wolski?
Yes.
Sitma?
Yes.
Jansen?
Yes.
Motion is approved. That takes us to 10.4, the sewer connection fee for 620 27th Street Southeast. I'll read a little more into this, as we do need an option selected in the motion. In 2011, following completion of the North Minot Sanitary Sewer Study, the City Council set the North Minot sewer connection fee at $3,787 per acre. Mr. Brian Sturm is planning to build a single-family residence structure at 650 27th Street Northwest, which is located within the North Minot sewer system. The residential lot is approximately 3.06 acres, which calculates to a connection fee of $11,584.41. He's requesting a reduction in the fee based on the developable area and consistency with neighbors. We do need an option that is before you in the motion. Alderman Janser.
I have a question. I mean, I'll maybe make a motion, but I have a question. So in as much as these fees in total pay for the entire project, if we reduce this fee from $11,000 to some other number, what happens? Who are we just short, and then the city eats the remainder, or what happens there? Can somebody explain that to me?
I think as Lance comes forward, I would also follow that up perhaps with the posed question. If that is subdivided, then a separate connection fee would also be attainable to that to make up some of the difference. Maybe let's let Lance answer the question first from Alderman Janser.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, and Alderman Pittner is what is pavement, not asphalt. So I want to leave out concrete. It's important. Basically, the way that we calculate the sewer connection fees, which is a pretty nationwide or commonly done nationwide practice, is you have a project that costs a certain percentage. You calculate the land area that can contribute to that project, and then you set up a fee per acre or fee per connection. Okay, so the city did that back in 2010, and that's how we came up with the number. So over time, we'll have projects that are completed, and we bond for those projects. And then as we connect folks to those sewer systems, we use those funds and others to pay back the bonds. So sometimes we'll have enough money to cover bond payments, and sometimes we don't, based on the number of connections. But we look at this in the long term. So it's not, we don't look at it on a year-by-year basis. We say, okay, over the next 40 years, how many connections do we think we're going to have? And then we set our payments accordingly. So the answer is, we don't have a good idea because sometimes it fluctuates. Sometimes we'll have enough money, sometimes we don't. And if we don't have enough income, then we have to look at rate adjustments to make up, to pay those bonds.
Alderman Janser.
And I guess following up on the comment that the mayor made a couple minutes ago, so in this case, though, with this particular piece of property, if roughly 2 acres of it is undevelopable for topography or whatever, there isn't any chance that somewhere down the line, they're going to subdivide this and sell off a couple of 1 acre lots and somebody else could build on it. I mean, that's pretty much a non-starter or not in reality. Is that correct?
Mr. Mayor and Alderman Janser, on this property, that's correct. The way the topography is and where they're putting the structure, it'd be very hard to try to subdivide this again. However, if somehow that was done, then we would still have the option to collect a connection fee for the new parcel if that would come to be.
And I guess just to be clear, so on this particular 3 acre lot, you know, we may reduce, let's say we reduce the connection fee by some amount. But if somebody else has a 3 acre lot and they subdivide it, then we would get connection fees based on that acreage.
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Janser, that's correct. So take, for instance, your average 1/8 acre single-family lot. When they come in the North Minot sewer shed and they pull a building permit, the typical fee is $800, $900, maybe $1,000 for a larger corner lot. On a lot like this, where it's 3 acres in size, of course, the fee based on acreage is high. But we've had situations like this come up before where you have a large tract of land. Some of it may not be developable, so we'll look at that with the landowner, and if we concur, and like we did here, that there are portions because of the slope you wouldn't be able to develop, we would recommend a fee reduction. However, staff can't do that, only council can. So we've listed several different options here for you to consider. If we had to venture a recommendation based on past practice, we would go with option 3, and that would be to collect that $3,787 because that's based on the 1 acre that we all agree is developable at the top.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Straight.
Mr. Mayor, I was just going to support option 3, but Mr. Meyer spoke to that, and that's why I'm supportive of that.
So we are looking for a motion.
Mayor, I'd make a motion to adopt option 3, connection fee of $3,787.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Pittner, second by Alderman Janser. Any further discussion or questions for Lance? Alderman Walski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Maybe Lance and possibly Mr. Lakefield too, but how often do we go back and sort of revise our work from, was it 2013 or 2011 and get a sense of whether everything's tracking the way we thought it might?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Wolski, I would say whenever we have a major sewer study that may connect into a system like this, we'll take a look at it. A few years ago, we modified the Puppy Dog Coulee Interceptors connection fee because we added some infrastructure onto that project to be able to expand into southwest Minot. So then, of course, that adds more cost and acreage into that sewer shed. So then we reevaluated that cost. So someday, if we take a look at any future improvements to the North Minot sewer shed, it'd be my recommendation to also look at the amount that we're charging for connection fees, just to make sure that we're able to keep up with infrastructure payments.
Further discussion or questions? Thank you, Lance.
You're welcome.
Further discussion? Motion before us is option 3, revise the connection fee calculation for this lot based on the 1 acre of developable, resulting in a connection fee of $3,787. Please call the roll.
Bittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Straight,
Yes.
Wolski,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson.
Yes.
Motion is approved. 10.5 is accepting the Strengthen ND Funding Toolkit and Next Step for Use Strategy. The recommendation before the City Council is to accept the Strengthen ND Funding Opportunity Toolkit and offer guidance on recommended next steps for use strategy.
So moved.
Motion by Alderman Janser to approve, second by Alderman Olson. Any discussion on the motion? Alderman Wolski.
A brief comment here for Mr. Zakian. John, this is a report that I'd like to see. So in the future, when we're approving things that have been brought forward like this, I think it'd be helpful to see the result of that work in our documentation.
Mr. Zakian.
Mayor Sitma, Alderman Wolski. It is on the website. I apologize for not getting it to you. It is voluminous. We will get you copies.
Sure. No need to print.
Then we'll forward you the connection.
Good.
It is very large, which is very good, but yes.
Okay.
So noted.
Thank you, Mr. Zakian. Any further discussion on the motion before us? Motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Zakian, Janser,
Yes.
you get to approve. Olson,
Yes.
Bittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Straight,
Yes.
Wolski,
Yes.
Sitma.
Yes. Motion is approved. 10.6 is the options for disposition of the spot blight acquired lots. It is recommended the City Council provide guidance on which option or options to use for the disposition of the properties which the city has acquired through the spot blight or zombie home program. There were 2 of those that were outlined in our handouts and online, and perhaps, Mr. Zakian, if you want to speak to this and we can get a recommendation from council.
Sure. Mayor, as briefly as I can. So we're back to the HUD rules. The national objective to go after the zombie homes is what is known as spot blight. The action required with spot blight is to acquire the homes and demolish them because they have been determined to be in such inhabitable state that there's no value in rehabilitating them. Once we have acquired them and demolished them, HUD allows us to then do something with the properties. However, it requires a new national objective. So what I have before you are the 2 possible options under the national objectives. And you can either authorize one of the 2 or both. The first objective is to do what we've done before, which is in effect follow the neighbor next door theme, which is to offer this property for sale. It would be severely restricted in its uses. The short version would be no structures whatsoever. The other option that would also meet a national objective is the LMI housing option. However, to be transparent, I don't know how financially feasible this will be. Currently, the statewide cap on how much an LMI-eligible single-family home owned by a single LMI resident can be is $272,000. In order to be able to purchase this lot and build a house, they would have to elevate it 1 foot above flood level established by FEMA. Now, in my experience, and I'm still learning my experience, that adds $100,000, anywhere from $75,000 to $100,000 to a traditional house, because you have to elevate it, in this case, depending on where the property is, anywhere from 6 to 12 feet. The other factor that has to be taken into account in terms of affordability, they will also be required, whoever purchases this, to carry flood insurance. That will be an absolute requirement. However, for transparency, and I'd like to see this, I did want to give you the 2 options. If you were to ask me, I would say the more viable option is the first one.
Mr. Zakian, just a quick question regarding option one. Let's walk down the road about 6 or 8 years, and I hope that we are through stages 4 and getting rezoned back into that 65% of the city being back into the X zone, the preferred low-risk rate. 1 foot above the BFE, the base flood elevation, on a low risk would put the river back into the flood control project, and then technically, if I'm reading this right and walking down the road, wouldn't require the substantial elevation that it would next year.
Mayor Sitma, good question. Unfortunately, yes, the answer is yes. But unfortunately, if we go down the route of urgent need, which is what this qualifies for, and we do sell the property, the restriction on no construction is in perpetuity.
Alderman Straight.
Mr. Mayor, thanks. And so, John, and this just happened to me on my way here tonight. We tore down a house, I think 3 or 4 blocks away from my house. The resident stopped me on my way here tonight asking if they could purchase the lot. So they could purchase it through the neighbor program. So we could not include covenants within that. It just has to remain that way in perpetuity, even though you couldn't offer them that option in the future. It's just that one or the other, that stark contrast.
Yes. And the basis for that is that the reason we have acquired in your I guess overall the answer is yes. It depends on what the purpose of the acquisition was. If the purpose of the acquisition was flood-related, then the answer is yes, this must be in perpetuity, because that's the basis on which we acquired the property. In the case of state-acquired properties like we did with the neighbor next door, no, then we just put the restrictions in that might be in the future changeable. But these properties are all federally acquired, and they all carry that restriction.
Alderman Padragula.
Could you enlighten us, or at least me, would there be any problems with choosing both options, leaving them both on the table for a given property?
Alderman Padragula, Mayor Sitma, no. We could do the auction offering both options. The other recommendation I do want to make, which is in the item before you, is that we did have an unexpected experience in the first auction we did. We had since we didn't have a base price or an upset price, using auction terms, we had one bidder come in at $20. Now, fortunately, that didn't go through because she thought she had no restrictions on the property and she was going to flip the property for $40,000. So that one fell through. So there is a recommendation that we have a minimum price set on this, whichever way we go. But with that minimum price universal, that demonstrates to HUD we will generate some program income at a reasonable basis. So if you wanted to choose to go both options, you could do that as well.
Would I be correct then that if we had both options, that would give the buyer more latitude and more flexibility and perhaps rehabilitate these properties more quickly?
Mayor Sitma, Alderman Padragula, let me make one thing clear. We could auction with both options, but then we would do an auction with them specifying which option they're exercising. And then, depending on which option they're exercising, the deed restriction either is you have to build LMI housing or you can't build. But yes, we can present both options, which is why I gave them to you.
Any further questions? Alderman Wolski.
Mr. Zakian, just a little bit of a process check on the Neighbor Next Door program. It seems a little more complicated today than when we used it in the past a year ago to get rid of some properties that the city had on its rolls for at least a few years. What's different today than in the past?
Mayor Sitma, Alderman Wolski, good question. Those properties have been acquired under state, and they did not carry the same limitations or restrictions. We still had to abide, since they were in the flood inundation zone, we still had to abide to make sure that we did not create a problem that FEMA would come back at us on. But in the case of these are the federal properties, and the restrictions are much more specific.
Further questions for Mr. Zakian? Alderman Janser.
Do you have a motion yet?
We do not.
Okay. I would move that we allow for the use of both options.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Janser, second by Alderman Olson. Discussion on the motion. Any discussion? Alderman Wolski.
Mayor Sitma, thanks. This is a judgment call, no right or wrong answer in any of this stuff, but on the whole, I would say just generally speaking, I'm uncomfortable with redevelopment in the flood zone. Whether we can or not, depending on whether these houses can be built and qualified for LMI, that's all the theoretical question at the end of the line, I guess. For me, the question is, should we? And I think 2011 taught us that we should not. My preference would be to support the Neighbor Next Door program and get these lots into neighbors' hands so they are maintained for neighborhoods and have them in that case for perpetuity with, obviously we're going to get flood protection done, but the term and the date is still a little bit uncertain. So again, I appreciate the motion, but I am going to oppose it because I think we're better off leaving these properties restricted.
Alderman Janser.
I would certainly recognize, and I do in making the motion, that, and I'm not in disagreement with Alderman Wolski's preference with regard to redevelopment in the floodplain, but I think that if there's an instance or two where something could work, it's worth leaving that door open. And it may be very well that the vast majority of these end up simply as green space in perpetuity, and that's fine as well. So that was my thought in making the motion.
Alderman Patagula.
I guess I wanted to echo what Mark said. I agree we should keep the floodplain as empty as possible, but that also means we forego tax dollars. And if there is a very unusual circumstance where someone finds the resources or for some set of reasons wants to build by the river and wants to elevate their home, I don't know that we need to stand in the way. I mean, I really agree, let's keep the flood zone as clear as possible, but there may be some extenuating circumstances. And we're looking at, perpetuity versus, maybe some change happening in 20, 15 years, whatever. So I'd favor the combined option, I think.
Any further discussion on the motion before we vote? Motion is with option 1 and option 2 to approve both. Please call the roll.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Straight,
Yes.
Wolski,
No.
Sitma.
Yes. Motion is approved. That takes us to number 11, miscellaneous and discussion items. We have none on our agenda for this evening. Alderman Pittner.
I just wanted to bring something, a thought that I had, if this is the appropriate time, on something from our last meeting with the Ann Street Bridge. I know that was kind of a contentious topic of discussion at the last meeting. There was some news coverage on it and whatnot. And I got home, and one thing that resonated with myself from the report that we had was the steel was really in really good shape. The steel was good. That stuck with me, and it made me think of a conversation I had with our one of our newer staff members, Mr. Brian Billingsley, and how in Caldwell, Idaho, they had incorporated some rafters from some old buildings and repurposed them into walking bridges. And I just wanted to put this out there and let it be known that I think there is room for creativity if whatever the future of the Ann Street Bridge or maybe some of these other iconic items are in our community, that maybe just tearing them down isn't the right answer. Maybe some repurposing, maybe some chip and Joanna Gainesing on these things is appropriate. And I just wanted to put that out there for staff and for the community to bring ideas like that to the table, because I'd hate to see some of these things go. But if we can reincorporate them into our community, just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you, Alderman Pittner. Any further items on our miscellaneous or discussion items? And this actually plays into exactly what we were talking about before, our issues of the personal appearances are at the beginning of the meeting.
So we can't talk about Fairview?
We already did.
We already did? You're not gonna speak
Extensively.
about it again? Okay. So you're just.
So I will tell you exactly what transpired at the beginning of the meeting is that we have a very lengthy meeting tomorrow set with city staff.
Okay.
We did hear from the residents, a couple of the residents.
I'm a resident, so.
Yes.
One of the
And-
3.
And thank you. We did have our personal appearances before, and that is the appropriate time and place. And if you do want, everything was recorded from our city council meeting earlier this evening.
Okay.
This is precisely why we had the conversation about moving our personal appearances to the end of the meetings tonight, because it does give people an opportunity to come away from work and see the process.
So there'll be more discussion tomorrow, is what you're stating?
There will be likely more information coming out throughout the media and likely brought up at the next city council.
Well, see, the
meeting.
media's got everything wrong, you guys. So I'd like the opportunity to actually explain what's really going on. Or maybe some answers from you guys about how we can be so shut down and pay somebody rent and you guys say it's not even a business. Where's the answers? You got disabled people and you have people with children that have no idea what's going on. This is your responsibility.
Well, I would say let's have a discussion with the police chief and myself
I've already
after the
spoken to him
meeting.
today, but yes, that'd be great.
Okay,
I'll be
thank you.
here.
If there are no further miscellaneous or discussion items on our agenda, that takes us to number 12, adjournment.
Motion
So
to
moved.
adjourn.
We have a motion by Alderman Olson, second by Alderman Pittner. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. We're adjourned.